So for today's session, we'll do something related to the functions, the filters in Tableau. So normally, if you have used Tableau building dashboard or for some basic visualization, you would understand there's a how do we have various options for filters in Tableau. So through this filters card here, so and whatever obviously we know that there are context filters, measure filters, dimension filters, data source filters, and we know those things. But often whatever the type of filter it is, when you're working on a certain view, the way these multiple filters, let's say you have put a filter on category and you have put a filter on let's say segment, okay, consumer segment. Now the way these two filters work is with the and logic. Okay, for example, let me put a category here, select topic, okay, and let me put segment. Okay, and let me do the same furniture and segment. Let me put it here. What I mean by and logic is basically, so it works whatever the filters that you have, whatever the intersection of these two filters, whatever the number of rows that satisfies both these filters will only get to your view. So if I remove consumer segment, my consumer segment is gone from everywhere, and when I remove furniture from categories, my furniture is also gone from everywhere. So only the ones that I'm putting through in both these filters is coming out into my visualization. So this is how typically the filters in Tableau work. By default they take into and logic. Okay, so but oftentimes when we are working on we know that there is not only and logic that is possible, but there's also or logic. If you have worked on SQL, we know that there's also possibility of or logic, but in Tableau it's not default for us to get that logic between filter. By default Tableau takes only and logic. Today we'll see how we can arrive at if we want a or logic in Tableau, and not only we want an or logic, but we should be able to basically switch between and or logic as required and see the results for both of them. So let's take a quick demo of the what we are trying to achieve. So I have a parameter here, so let me change this to and filter. Okay, let me change this to and I have, let me put this everything to default. Okay, and right. So okay, so this is my default setup, and as of now I have 3 views in my dashboard, just showing my sales across region, category, and segment as a bar chart. Now I have 3 sets of filters here: slicer 1 and the values for slicer 1, slicer 2 and values for slices 2, and likewise for slicer 3. Let's just do some random selections. Okay, so these slicer 1 and 2, 3 should act like a different filters among which we would like to toggle between and or logics. So let's say in the first slicer, let me just select a region, and for region values, let me just say let me just pass on central region. Okay, and okay, no selection, just a minute. just that some of the slicers were not selected, so I'm just changing those things. Okay, and okay, now it should be good. And if I just do this, yeah. So when let's say I remove everything, but let's just say I keep central. Okay, as you can see, my first slicer, and each of these slicer will work on the entire dashboard. I have selected only central region. So in the region level graph, I am only getting central sales, and all the east, west, and south related sales were omitted. Okay, the ones in the blue are the ones which are passed through the filter, and the ones on the gray are basically ones which are not passed by the filter. And obviously on the furniture, and since they in all category and segment, they involve sales from all the 4 regions, only some of them, the sales related to the central region are omitted outside. These numbers are slightly the bars do not represent the exact length, as the axes are different, and likewise. Okay, let me for selection 2, let me select a category and select some for one category alone. So let's say technology, and I get to see the same, right? So on technology alone, I'm seeing, and earlier whatever has to be here, that has been changed to omitted section. Now let me just select segment 3, and here let me just select corporate. Okay, so basically these values are whatever that has been passing is basically a intersection of all these filters. Hey, only central region from technology category in the corporate segment, those are the sales that we are looking at. Everything else is omitted here. Now if I quickly change this to from and to or, let's see how the results show up. So there's a lot of it's a drastic change, obviously, as we expected. So here it's saying that, hey, if either of these conditions satisfies, if the sale, that particular sale is satisfying either of these, either if it's coming from central region, just put it there. So or if we see here east, south, and west, reason being these sales, though we are eliminating the region east, south, and west, but they are satisfying the condition. Hey, they could be coming from technology, and they could also come from corporate segment. So the values here in the east, south, and west, they are basically telling, hey, they are not from central region, but they are belonging to these particular values, either technology category or corporate segment. That is the reason why they are showing up in the selected values. So you get the idea of what we are trying to achieve here. So let's try and see how we can create this same setup using Tableau. So I got my sample superstore data set. So first I would need a let me actually just do this. Let me connect to data superstore. So for the first step, we need to create the parameter which we want, right? So we would like to toggle between and or. So let's just create that parameter that gives us the ability to switch between one and the other. Request. Okay. Show parameter, and then we need to create parameters for our filters, right? So we will just create parameters for our slicers, slicer 1 and slicer 2, slicer 3. Since we have the ability to choose whatever the field that we want, on which field we would like to filter on, either region, category or segment, we'll just provide it here. So first let's go ahead and create the parameter, and let's call it slicer 1 and string. Actually, let's go with this list, and let's say 1, 2, and 3. For the first one, we'll call region. Let's call this as category, and this as segment. Okay, click OK. And let's just duplicate these things for slicer 2 and slicer 3. We need the same, so duplicate, another duplicate. So let's just rename this. Slicer 2, and let me rename this as slicer 3. Right. Parameters. Okay, great. So I've got all my 4 parameters, but it looks like I've missed something. If we saw in the dashboard, we have allowed a certain situation where if a certain user don't want to filter by anything, we should give them the option of, hey, I don't want to use any filter as of now, so I should provide an option, hey, if you don't want to do any selection, the user should be able to select it. So for that, we need to add one more section here, 0, and just say no selection. So whenever the option is no selection, there will not be any filtering. So it looks like I need to add this. Pull this to the top. Okay, and add it in 2 as well. So now I have all the values that user can select on what field he wants to filter on. Now I need to create fields which dynamically change based on this parameter selection. So let me create a calculated field. Let me call this as naming is slightly important here. So yeah. So let's call this dynamic value. Okay, just a minute. Value underscore selection 1, and let's just if my slicer 1 simple if statement is equal to 0, then it should be basically no selection, because that's what the option there. Else if slicer 1 is equal to 1, then show me region field here. Else if slicer 1 is equal to 2, then show me category. Else if slicer 1 is equal to 3, then show me segment. And simple if statement, and let me just click OK. and duplicate this for the same slicer 2 and slicer 3, since we want the same functionality there as well. So let me just edit this. Slicer is dynamic value for selection 2, and this should be slicer 2. Slicer, okay, and let me go ahead and use for slicer 3. Okay, so now I have my dynamic value fields as well. So basically, based on my selection, they would change, which we already know. Just a minute. Okay, so since my slicer 1 is on region, I'm seeing those region values. If I change this to category, category and segment. So likewise for all of you, change this to no selection, there will be only a no selection value, and likewise this is how all the 3 would work. Now we need to provide an option for the user based on the selection. Let's say on the slicer 1, if he selects a region, he should be able to get the option there saying, hey, what regions do you want to select? So that we will achieve by creating sets. This is something which we saw in our previous sessions on these dynamic fields. So on the selection 1, I'll create a set, okay, and let's just I'll say use all the options that are present, and call this set little better for the user to read. Select values for slicer 1. Okay, so click OK, and I got my set. And if I ask this, okay, so okay, normally if we know about sets in Tableau, they almost can act like a filter as well. But if you see, when I want to show this set onto the view, it's asking me basically, hey, you have to use some field that is related to this set into the view, only then I'll be able to display it. So let's just pull this thing again back to our rows. In that case, I should be able to okay, once again, okay, at least I have the filter option. So filter, no, not this one. Let's just, okay, let's come back to that in a while. Actually, we'll create a field to include these things into our view. For time being, let's just put it in here, detailed, and see if it's working or not. Show set. And okay, if I change my slicer 1 to category, my set values are changing, and likewise. Okay, great. In that, now all I have to do is I have to create a similar sets for my value 2 and slicer 2 and slicer 3. So create set, use all, and select values for slicer 3, slicer 2. Click OK, and likewise create a set for slicer 3. Use all. Click OK. So now I have 1 and 2 and 3 slices. Now we need to enable the toggle function between and or logics based on our parameter selection for this one. So let me do this. First create a simple view. Let's say region. Okay, and let me just drop sales. Awesome. And let me show it. Okay, there's a certain calculation field, okay, that will enable the functionality. It's a little lengthy calculation. Let me just show that calculation which enables the toggle functionality, and I'll explain it briefly what it does. It's not uh, though it looks lengthy, but it's a very simple logic. So based on what we have created, so we have created so far one parameter called and or number one, and okay, sounds good, looks good. And we have created three slicer parameters, slicer 1, slicer 2, slicer 3, and for each of those slicers we have created dynamic values based on those, whatever the parameter has been selected, we will have those values and their corresponding set filters. Now let's just see what's this calculation. It's a simple conditional statement saying that, hey, if my and or parameter, if it is equal to and, just work as usual. Okay, so since and is something default that Tableau does, so we don't have to work anything there. Our work will be completely focused on the or logic. So on whenever this parameter is and, just see, hey, if my set 1 wherever it is true, just send it through, and we set slicer 2, if it is true, send it through, slicer 3, if it is true, send it through. It's just like saying drop all those slicer filters onto filters pane and just work in a default way. So that is how and logic will work. But coming to or logic, okay, this is where we what we want to achieve. So whenever my parameter and or is not and but or, what I have to do is check if my either of the three slicers, either of the three filters have any selection in them. Okay, my first option here is saying if slicer 1 is no selection, so basically slicer filter 1 there is no filtering action needed there, and likewise if slicer 2 no selection, slicer 3 no selection, then send everything. So because user doesn't want to filter anything out, he has not selected any filters, so just send everything through to the view. Now on the second logic, if my slicer 1 is not equal to no selection, that means on the slicer 1 user has selected some filter he needs, either a region or category or segment. If it is this, slicer 1 is not an empty filter, but slicer 2 is empty filter and slicer 3 is empty filter. In that case, what you do is, and my parameter is or, just whatever that has been accepted in slicer 1, just send it through. Okay, and because that's what we want. Anyway, slicer 2 and slicer 3 are empty, right? So let's, and likewise we have all the possibilities when all the combinations, basically when slicer 1 is not selected but slicer 2 is selected and slicer 3 is not selected, and likewise all. Let's just go through the last selection where all the three filters are filtering on some field. So slicer 1 is doing some filtering, slicer 2 is doing some filtering, and slicer 3 is also doing some filtering. In that case, what you have to do is, okay, just come here, and if my either of the filters, okay, here is where we actually provide that or logic. If we see here, we are using the word or statement. So basically what it's trying to say is, even when the user is selected all the three filters, just see if a certain row satisfies either of the slicer 1 or slicer 2 or slicer 3. If it satisfies either of these three, just consider it as true. So that is how we achieve at the or logic. Once it consider it as true, and then once everything is true, then just send it through. So yeah, it's a little lengthy, but fairly simple logic to achieve it or functionality. So we will create that. Let me actually edit this. This is copy this and create a field. Let's call this dynamic value selection and or. Okay, Now I just have to rename these things. Take this through. Okay. And dynamic value selection 1. It looks like there's a spelling mistake. Okay, let's just come and rectify here. L-E. Okay. Now let's just go here, edit. Yeah, everything looks good. And now this is, since this is finally basically this field that which we have created is a Boolean field, which based on the logic it will either pass through certain values or omit certain values. So let me just put this here, true or false, and again on slicer 1. Okay, now if we see earlier when we are trying to showcase these set values onto the view, we saw that hey, we're unable to show set, but with the help of this particular field which we have created, the dynamic value, the logic that we have wrote, since these fields are included in this set and that field is present in the view, we should be able to now get this option show set. So let's just say let me change this to region and quickly check if it's working or not. So if I remove central, yeah, so my central is coming under false because it's omitted, and everything else is coming as true. So let me do a quick some changes here. Right, let me just do put my true. Okay, and then just rename this to selected. So these are the ones which are passed through, and these are the ones which got omitted. Click OK, and put the same field in color so we get some distinction. Edit colors, and let's say omitted is that. Click OK. Looks good. Yeah, okay, now let me just duplicate this and call this category. So let's have the same visualization at a category level instead of a region level. Great. Let's call this region. And duplicate this. Duplicated segment. Yeah. So let's just check for the segment. So let me remove slicer 1. Let's say no selection on slicer 1, and let me select for slicer 3. So let me show this, show set. Pull this here. Slicer 3, slicer 1. Slicer 2. Okay. So when I change my slicer 2 to, let's say, segment, and change it to corporate, yeah. So I am able to see my changes here as well. So now it's all about putting them together in a dashboard. So let me get back to my original workbook. Yeah, so we can just put them through in a single dashboard like this, and arrange all the filters on the right side to be able to basically switch between and or logic based on the filters that which we have. We can do a little more on the same, a little bit more formatting, and make it look like a little more visually appealing, something like this. And a few other additions what we can do here is basically we have our it's the same template that we have under our logic, our filters, and while creating these parameters we can create multiple fields as well. So for example, in the same parameter we can provide either if they want to provide at a region level filter or state level filter. In the same category you can product level we can provide category or subcategory level filter option, and likewise multiple options we can provide. Whenever we select that, let's say subcategory, obviously we will get what we are expecting, and just formatted likewise. And I can also play with the dynamic field. So as of now it's showing sales, but I can change create this functionality as well, saying just show me quantity sold, or order count, how many orders am I receiving, something like that. So yeah, this enables a great way for the user to look at the data from various angles. Yeah, any questions that you would like to ask at this point in time? Okay, in that case, yeah, and that's all I had for today, guys.